Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Stubborn today. Hello and welcome to Jiggers' Place. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time to have a cocktail with you and talk about all the non-financial parts of life. We talk about relationships, we talk about values, we talk about literature, and we talk about entertainment, and that's the theme for today. I'm going to be talking about film noir. It is far and away my favorite film genre, and I've been a noir fan since, gosh, I think ever since I was a teenager. I don't think I watched any film noir when I was a child, although television had a lot of, I think, noir-inspired shows on it at the time. I remember watching a TV show with my dad called The FBI. Hawaii Five-0 wasn't strictly noirish, but the kind of detective nature of it, and it was kind of oftentimes the gritty side of Hawaii. And then I did a show not too long ago on detective fiction, as I recall. And of course, film noir is an outgrowth of the gritty urban detective fiction that developed in the 1940s and 1950s, or 1930s, I should say, starting in the 1930s. But we'll get into that. First, we're going to have a cocktail. And with my cocktail designer, with my cocktail designer ChatGPT, we came up with a cocktail called Smoke and Motives. I love the title. It is a rye-based cocktail, and rye is my favorite spirit. It's not my favorite wine. My favorite wine is champagne, but my favorite spirit is rye, which is a type of whiskey. I'm going to be using, for this cocktail, Bullet Rye. If you recall, 2 weeks ago, I made a cocktail with Bullet Bourbon. Bullet is they do it well. And so, I'm going to take it from this is my library decanter I have here. But I wanted to show you what the bottle looked like to give the Bullet people, a free plug. It's the one with the green label as opposed to the bourbon, which has kind of an orange colored label. And then we're going to use some Benedictine. We're going to use some fresh lemon juice that I just squeezed. It was why I started a couple minutes late. And we're going to rinse the glass with Mezcal. I'm using a Hoya Azul Mezcal. To be honest, I don't know where I found this, but Mezcal has a smokiness to it, a little bit different than tequila, although they're both made from agave. Tequila is made only from blue agave. Mezcal can be made, as I understand it, from any kind of agave. Okay, and then we're going to use a little bit of Bittermans Boston Bittahs. Okay, we've got our shaker. So we're going to start out with 2 ounces of rye whiskey. And, oops, don't fall over, stopper. And, you would think after all the times I've made cocktails, I would know where the 2-ounce mark was. So there we've got our whiskey. And we're going to have a 1/2 ounce each of Benedictine and lemon juice. And if you sign up for my email list, you'll get the recipes in advance, and it tells you all the different flavors. So the Benedictine has kind of an herbal warmth, and a little bit of mystery to it. Nobody really knows how Benedictine is made except for the one rabbi who decided it was kosher. Okay, this is a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. Just gonna pour that in there. And then a couple of dashes of Bittermans Boston Bittahs. Okay. And then before we shake up the cocktail, I'm gonna, with the Mezcal, just pour a little bit into the glass. We're gonna do what's called a rinse. Actually, I poured a little bit too much. That's okay. And you just swirl it around in the glass just to coat the inside of the glass. Okay, and then when you're done, just pour off the excess. I'll drink it after the show. Okay, and now I'm gonna shake the cocktail. And as I always remind you, we're shaking it not just to mix it, but to let some of the ice melt, which mixes into a little bit of water, which opens up the flavors. You can see that the shaker is nice and frosty, hopefully. Okay. And I'm thirsty, so I'm not going to shake it quite as long as I normally do. Okay, and then I'm going to strain it into the Mezcal rinsed glass. Get all of that in there. There you go. And I'm going to garnish it with a lemon twist. I don't have any smoldering thyme. And happy days. And you know, you can taste just the smokiness a little bit. It's great. Okay, I'll see you over on the couch. So here we are. It's Thursday evening if you're on the East Coast. This is good. And you know, another day and we're at the weekend. Or in my case, another day and we're at what's called Erev Shabbat, the day before Shabbat, and then Saturday is the Sabbath. And yeah, so it's nice to relax together. Thanks for joining me. So, film noir. First of all, I'm going to show you several books, but I want to start out by showing you this particular book. This is called The Art of Noir, and it's compiled by a fellow named Eddie Muller. And for my money, Eddie Muller is far and away the most knowledgeable film noir scholar probably in the world, certainly in the United States. I used to watch Eddie Muller. He on Turner Classic Movies. He presented a noir film every Saturday night. His knowledge is absolutely encyclopedic, and so while I am an aficionado and I know some things about it, I don't pretend to be anything like the expert that Eddie Muller is. Among other things, Mr. Muller puts together film noir festivals in various cities across the country. My friend Rick Carter, who longtime producing partner on a number of film and video projects. We've been to the Film Noir Festival here in Los Angeles, I think 2 or 3 times over the years. And unfortunately, because of work and other reasons, we haven't been able to go all the time. But as much as I enjoy watching film noir on television or DVDs, or even I think I even have a few on cassette, not cassette tape, sorry, VHS. There is nothing like seeing film noir on the big screen with an audience, especially if it's a restored print of the film
I know I've seen Double Indemnity that way. I've certainly seen the Maltese Falcon many times, same with The Big Sleep. In fact, most of Humphrey Bogart's film noir I've seen numerous times. Pretty much any time he's playing, I will go. Huge Humphrey Bogart fan. So, you may be thinking, okay, film noir, I've heard of it. I've never seen it. What's the big deal, right, with film noir? So, as I always do, I make some notes so I can speak to you cogently, right? So, first of all, film noir is really a cinematic style, right? It's a genre of movie, and it was popularized in the 1940s and 50s, and it's characterized by its dark, moody, intense nature. It's almost always filmed in black and white, even as color was becoming much more common in films. Film noir were even a film noir were filmed in black and white, and the visuals had a moodiness about them. There were oftentimes it was shot on location. And favorite film noir cities, San Francisco, usually there'd be scenes at night with fog. Los Angeles, of course, was a big noir city. Chicago, New York. Those are probably the four right, most common noir settings. And then sometimes there would be others, and where exactly it was happening, it wasn't, it was a fictitious city. Or it was like some small town where some creepy thing was going on. So that's the setting of it, and film noir typically have some kind of moral ambiguity about them, and the fact that noir came to popularity in the post-World War II period, I don't think is coincidental. So, coming out of World War II, where tens of millions of Americans had either directly or through a loved one experienced the unbelievable carnage of a world war. So unlike World War I, where Americans heard about the carnage, but when all was said and done, it wasn't the time America spent involved in World War I was only about 18 months, around April of 1917 until November of 1918. And the time that Americans were in combat was even shorter than that, because General Pershing spent about the first 9 months or so, 10 months of the American Expeditionary Force being in Europe, training and getting the American soldiers and Marines, up to combat readiness. So it was a relatively short experience for Americans. Far fewer Americans participated in World War I than World War II, and so hence the impact of World War I was different. World War II, there were 8 to 10 million Americans in uniform. There were probably another million or so people, civilians, supporting the military. There were military contractors, so many people involved in the government, supporting the DoD or supporting defense contractors. And then all of these veterans came home, and their loved ones were exposed to a certain extent to their experiences. And it was really kind of almost like a waking up of America to just how brutal human nature could be on a grand scale. And for all that most Americans believed that what the United States had done was a good thing, still the brutality with which Americans had to fight really came home to Americans. So, Patton was famous for essentially his blitz type warfare, just absolutely running over the enemy if possible, right? And so the idea of Americans being so brutal was kind of new to the American psyche, even though, like I said, the vast majority of Americans recognized it as being necessary. And so this moral ambiguity about who really is a good guy, how does he really behave, crept its way into film noir and became a central aspect of it. So oftentimes the hero was a brutal man. He beat people up. He didn't necessarily treat women courteously, etc. And yet it was all done with a sense of attaining justice. Sometimes justice when it was clear that the police and the regular levers of justice were just not going to function in a way that would bring justice about. So that's really the heart of film noir. And the themes were, of course, crime, but a lot of times it dealt with corruption in city governments and police departments, among business. And so, again, it kind of took aim at institutions that heretofore had always been portrayed as being pillars of American society, and film noir showed the sort of dark underbelly of some of these institutions. So, as I mentioned a minute ago, the cinematic style, the visual style, was a stark black and white cinematography. And there was a lot of shadows and indirect lighting, all which gives it this very sort of almost fatalistic quality. Some of the plots, or many of the plots, I should say, revolved around ideas of greed, betrayal, and sort of existential despair. Oftentimes, the betrayer was a woman, the so-called femme fatale, right? And if you look at movies in the pre-noir period, women, generally speaking, were portrayed in an almost goddess-like way a lot of the times, or at least in a highly respected way. Whereas oftentimes in film noir, it turned out that the woman was at the heart of what was going on, or at least she was very involved with it. So for example, in what's typically considered the first film noir, The Maltese Falcon. So I'm going up on the actress's name now, who plays Humphrey Bogart's love interest. But in the beginning, you think her character, who goes by many names, including Bridget O'Shaughnessy, she seems to be the sort of classic, woman in need, right? And she goes to Sam Spade, played by Humphrey Bogart, to get his help. So she's sort of the damsel in distress, right? And then, for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to give the plot away, but it's not really giving anything away for you to find out that she is not a damsel in distress, okay? And so, that was a very common theme, is that women could be just as nasty and evil as men, sometimes even more so. So the narrative style, it oftentimes used flashbacks, it used voiceover. There was a lot of sort of creativity in the way the story is presented, and that's another just fascinating aspect of film noir. So, why do I love film noir? I mean, for everything that I've just described. First of all, it is a genre that really pulls you in. So in a good film noir, you are hoping that the protagonist reaches his aim. You are happy when the villains finally get theirs, and you want the betrayers punished. You want the greedy to have their downfall. It allows us to sort of indulge in the attainment of justice, even as we know that at least sometimes the wheels of justice go awry. So for me, that's one of the things. I think it also, because it explores this idea of moral ambiguity, which is the reality of life. I mean, I think we think we want to live in a world that's perfectly just, but the reality is we could never survive in such a world. And so life is by its nature morally ambiguous, and film noir has a working through of that that's very satisfying, right? And so, especially like for me, as you know, right, I live a traditional Jewish life, and a God-centered life, I hope, and it can be very frustrating because it's like, why is God letting these things happen, right? So in a film noir, at the end, rarely do you think to yourself, oh God, you let me down, right? No, justice is done almost always. There's one particular film noir that I really love. It stars Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, and I don't remember the name of it now, but Agnes Moorehead, who played Samantha Stevens' mother and Dora in the TV show Bewitched, is one of the supporting characters. Oh my gosh, what an absolutely evil woman. And there's a scene in them, again, I don't want to give any of this away to you, because if you watch these movies, you want to be, surprised. But there is her final scene is just it. I mean, you can see I'm speechless over it because there's no way to describe it, but it is just so impactful. Okay, so and that's another reason why film noir is so impactful. The bleakness of it, but the redemption at the end, it engages our emotions in a very, very powerful way. And even when, so oftentimes film noir, in the end, when the bad guy gets his, right, he's killed or he's captured and thrown in prison, whatever it is, oftentimes, because we've been along the journey of his struggle, as much as we're happy that in the end justice has been done, yet we're left with a sense of bittersweetness, because we see that this horrible man was on some level a tortured soul, and he's crept into us enough that we've identified with him at least a little bit. And so, as disturbing as it is, while at the same time for me anyway, I'll speak for myself, at the same time I'm glad that he finally got it in the end. I feel a little bad for him, because he was, oftentimes they're such powerful characters. Had they not turned to crime, what would they have done in society, right? Those kinds of feelings. So, there's other things, the symbolism oftentimes in the movie, the dialogue oftentimes is brilliant. The Maltese Falcon has some of the most brilliant dialogue. I quote certain parts of it often. The Big Sleep, which is Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, the interplay between the two of them is brilliant. And so the writing is just top notch. So these are I think the reasons why I love film noir. I think they're the reasons why so many people love not just love film noir. So I'm going to show you the artwork of some of the best known film noir. So if you can see this is the posters, one of the posters from The Killers. Okay, and The Killers. It was based on a Hemingway story, Ernest Hemingway, fabulous 20th century American writer. It stars Burt Lancaster, as I recall. Yeah, and Ava Gardner, two amazing stars of this period. And it is, again, an outstanding example of film noir. The Killers was 1946. Okay, one of my all-time favorite film noirs. I mentioned it just a minute ago, The Big Sleep with Bogart and Bacall. Again, the dialogue between the two of them is outstanding. The Big Sleep was written by, I'm trying to think, Raymond Chandler, I believe. Let me see if does it say here. Yeah, it was written by Raymond Chandler, directed by Howard Hawks, and The Big Sleep was also 1946. Okay, and then let's see which one is next here in Eddie Muller's book. Okay, so here's the other one I mentioned, The Maltese Falcon. Again, well, so this is Mary Astor and Humphrey Bogart. Okay, and again, this is The Maltese Falcon is widely considered to be the first true film noir. It was it came out in 1941, right? So it was just before the United States got involved in World War II. It is brilliant. It was written by, so the original book was written by Dashiell Hammett, one of the great crime fiction / detective novelists, and one of my all-time favorite actors, Sidney Greenstreet, aka the Fat Man, if you've ever seen Casablanca, is in The Maltese Falcon. So is is his name here? Yeah, Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre is also in The Maltese Falcon. It's interesting. Sidney Greenstreet is not, he's not named on the poster, I just noticed. But Sidney Greenstreet is outstanding. Okay, so let's see that. Oh, what do I have next here on the hit parade? Oh, okay. One of the best known film noir, Double Indemnity, with Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck. Now, if you only ever saw Barbara Stanwyck in the latter part of her career on television, when she's older, you cannot appreciate what a gorgeous woman she was in the early part of her career. The kind of woman who, you know, if she were walking down the street, men would be just enamored of her beauty, and she had a quality about her. Barbara Stanwyck, you don't hear nearly as much about her as you do someone like Ava Gardner or Lana Turner, or other actresses who were well known in film noir, let alone other areas of film, Ginger Rogers, Judy Garland, you know, the great actresses you'll hear about. Barbara Stanwyck had tremendous range. She could do comedy, noir, drama, a truly outstanding actress. And Double Indemnity, which also starred Edward G. Robinson, who's one of the great actors. Double Indemnity came out in 1944, and it's one of those films that employs an unusual way of telling the story. Okay, another terrific film noir is The Asphalt Jungle with Sterling Hayden. So Sterling Hayden is not a particularly well-known actor, but in noir circles he is. He did a huge number of film noir, an outstanding actor. And I think I've got one more that I'm going to show you. Right, okay. So this is another Humphrey Bogart. Oh, and Which one was I just? Oh, the Asphalt Jungle was, I want to say maybe like 1952. It was a little bit later. Okay, and then another Humphrey Bogart film noir. Again, one of my favorites with Ida Lupino, High Sierra. Ida Lupino, fascinating woman. She invented a radar enhancement in World War II, later became a director. Really astonished. She is superb, as is Humphrey Bogart. High Sierra, early, like 1940. Okay. So, okay. Now, so those are some of the great film noir. And so I want to mention just a few of the writers. I've mentioned a couple names before, but first of all, Raymond Chandler. Many of his books were made into film noir, including The Big Sleep that I've already mentioned many times. Farewell, My Lovely, very well known. The Lady in the Lake, also very well known. His best known character is Philip Marlowe. That is the character that Humphrey Bogart plays in The Big Sleep. He's off. There are many actors who've played Philip Marlowe, but he's Raymond Chandler's best known character. Another well-known writer in the film noir genre is Dashiell Hammett, who I also mentioned. He wrote the novel The Maltese Falcon. It was adapted for the screen by John Huston, who, as I recall, also directed The Maltese Falcon. And Dashiell Hammett also wrote Red Harvest, The Dane Curse. Probably his two best known characters were Sam Spade, which is the character that Humphrey Bogart plays in The Maltese Falcon, and a character called the Continental Op. He was an operative for the Continental Detective Agency, and for example, Red Harvest is a story about the Continental Op. Quite a fascinating guy. Gotta have a little sip here. So Dashiell Hammett, and James M. Cain. So he wrote novels including Double Indemnity and The Postman Always Rings Twice. If you like your film noir very spicy, as in man-woman spicy, so The Postman Always Rings Twice will absolutely be for you. It stars the brilliant John Garfield, who unfortunately died very young, and the absolutely beautiful Lana Turner. And their screen chemistry, it's amazing that the film doesn't get burned up and it still goes through the projector. His stories tended to be very morally complex. Both Double Indemnity and The Postman Always Ring Twice involved infidelity, but like deep betraying infidelity, and really, in his stories, unlike other film noir where you're rooting for somebody, in James M. Cain's stories, you basically want everybody to get it in the end. They're all just horrible people. Okay, and then W.R. Burnett was a screenwriter. He wrote Little Caesar, the great Edward G. Robinson film, where he plays the eponymous character Little Caesar. And he also wrote High Sierra, that I mentioned a minute ago, with Humphrey Bogart and Ida Lupino. And he also wrote The Asphalt Jungle, which I mentioned, the great Sterling Hayden film. So his films tended to be more gangster oriented. Certainly that's the case with Little Caesar and The Asphalt Jungle. High Sierra is not so much gangsterish, but it definitely is crime. Okay, so those are three or four of the truly great film noir writers, outstanding noir directors. Billy Wilder, who of course is one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history. He directed Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard, and The Lost Weekend, all noir or sort of noirish films. The Lost Weekend really isn't a noir film, but it has the same kind of atmospheric quality to it. And it is a brilliant movie. I'm using a lot of superlatives today. If you've watched the show regularly, you know I don't use a lot of superlatives, but when it comes to this period in Hollywood movie making, it's easy to be superlative. John Huston, who I mentioned a minute ago, did the adaptation of The Maltese Falcon. He directed it as well, as I mentioned. He also directed The Asphalt Jungle. Huston, again, one of the great directors. And one of Huston's qualities was he developed very strong characters. So both Billy Wilder and John Huston, they directed other types of films besides film noir, and they brought their work from other genres into their film noir, but they also brought their experience in film noir to other films outside the genre. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're such great directors. John Huston, of course, directed many amazing Westerns, especially with John Wayne, just, a towering director. Fritz Lang is another one known for great film noir movies, including The Big Heat and Scarlet Street. Now, Fritz Lang was originally from Germany, and he brought this sort of German expressionist, I'm trying to think of the German expressionist influence, that's what I'm looking for, to his film noir that he did here in the United States. And then Robert Siodmak, he directed The Killers and Crisscross. And then I saved this for last because anytime I see this film anywhere, I will go to see it. A Lonely Place, starring Humphrey Bogart as a sort of dissipated Hollywood writer, Gloria Graham as his love interest. And it's A Lonely Place is directed by Nicholas Ray, who among film aficionados is really well known, but he was never well known to the general public the way John Huston was, or Billy Wilder, or people at that level, Vincent Minnelli, etc. If you ever get to see in A Lonely Place, especially in a theater, just please do yourself a favor and go watch it. So the film is shot, some of the location shots are in Beverly Hills. And you see the Beverly Hills of the early 1950s, I believe the film was made. And it gives you a sense of the kind of greater Los Angeles area of that period. It also gives you a pretty realistic behind the scenes look to Hollywood. So whereas MGM oftentimes really presented the glamour of Hollywood, Nicholas Ray in A Lonely Place is really showing you the dark underbelly of Hollywood, for the movie industry, Hollywood. Okay, so those are some of the great directors. And then I think I've mentioned most of these actors before, but I think the top, film noir actors, Humphrey Bogart I've mentioned, Edward G. Robinson, Robert Mitchum, who appeared in Out of the Past, The Night of the Hunter, and The Big Sleep. I think he plays the police detective in The Big Sleep, if I remember correctly. Fred McMurray, who plays the insurance man in Double Indemnity. If you're my vintage, you remember Fred McMurray playing the father in My Three Sons, right? That was the Fred McMurray I knew, or I knew him from the Disney film about the Boy Scouts, Follow Me. And then I saw him in Double Indemnity, and I'm like, oh, I like that Fred McMurray much more. So as much as a Boy Scout guy I am. Dick Powell, who one of the great actors of the age. He was the leading man in Murder My Sweet, but Dick Powell also did a lot of radio shows, including oh gosh, I can hear him. Oh gosh, God, I can't think of the name. Can't think of the name. But anyway, he did a lot of detective radio shows. All of them, if they had been visual, would have been film. They're film noir. They're noirish, in an audio sense. Okay, Raymond Burr, great actor. He was often the villain or the tough guy. So, although I don't know that I would necessarily call this a film noir per se. If you've ever seen Rear Window, the quintessentially brilliant film, Alfred Hitchcock with Jimmy Stewart and the most beautiful woman who ever lived, Grace Kelly. So Raymond Burr plays the heavy in that film. So if you're interested in who's this guy Raymond Burr, go see Rear Window. Again, just like with In a Lonely Place. If you ever get the chance to see Rear Window in a movie theater, just go. Trust me, go. Okay. Outstanding film noir actresses, both femme fatale and leads. So I mentioned Barbara Stanwyck, who is the quintessential femme fatale in Double Indemnity. Lauren Bacall, who did The Big Sleep and Dark Passage with Humphrey Bogart. Very sultry actress, and had enormous on-screen chemistry with Humphrey Bogart. Veronica Lake, who is known for her peekaboo hairdo because her hair typically covered one eye. She was in Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia. Both great films. Jean Tierney, who was in Laura and Leave Her to Heaven. Gloria Graham. Next to Barbara Stanwyck, Gloria Graham, for me, tops even Lauren Bacall. She is, from films like Oklahoma, where she, which is a musical, and she plays a comedic role, and then to see her in A Lonely Place, she is beautiful, impactful. Just gripping in her performances. And then wrapping up with Rita Hayworth, who was in Gilda, oftentimes mixing glamour with danger. So, if you have any liking at all for classic Hollywood, the 40s, 1940s and 50s and into the very early 60s. So you will see most of the great actors and actresses appearing in a film noir at one time or another. So let me share a few more film noir books for you. So this is a book edited by John Grant. This is called Film Noir, a comprehensive encyclopedia of film noir. It's the essential reference guide. It has literally thousands, 3,250 entries in it. By the way, this is Robert Mitchum right here. And it includes 2,200 US movies, over 600 UK movies, almost 300 French movies, and then movies from another 5 or 6 countries. So this really covers film noir internationally. Another wonderful book is the Film Noir Guide. This is edited by Michael F. Keeney. And again, this is 700 films from the classic period of film noir, which really focuses on the 1940 to 1959. Whereas the comprehensive encyclopedia of film noir covers the entire breadth of film noir up until very recently. Okay, and then another noir book focusing on kind of the classic period, in this case 1941 through 1950, is Into the Dark. This is published by Turner Classic Movies. Of course, you know, TCM, they're a network dedicated to classic movies, and as I mentioned in the beginning, Eddie Muller is their sort of noir specialist, and this is a book they published, and I think it's a guide to various films as well, so you can see, you know, in this case, the window, and they give you information about it. So I haven't found any. I'm sure they're out there, but I don't have any books that, you know, talk about just noir, film noir as a genre and how it developed, that kind of thing. Most of them tend to be more these guidebooks where you learn about the genre by learning about the individual movies. And in the end, that is the delight of film noir, is you can discover it by watching truly fascinating, engaging movies. And I think each film noir aficionado makes it our own. So I mentioned my friend Rick Carter. Rick and I have been watching film noir together for decades, and I think if he were here and we were talking about it, you would hear different perspectives on film noir. And in the end, that's one of the things that makes it so wonderful. It is a conversation without end, because fundamentally it's a conversation about human nature. And human nature is endlessly fascinating. It has an infinite number of varieties to it. And so we're never at a loss for talking about it. And so this is my, you know, homage, if you will, to film noir. If you are already a fan, I'd love to hear, you know, what you love about film noir. Please drop me a comment in my social media. All the links will be in the show notes, of course, as they always are once it posts on YouTube. If you haven't indulged in film noir, I can't encourage you enough to check it out. It is a treat. It's like eating a hot fudge sundae. Okay, it's drinking an entire, not bottle, magnum of champagne, and you don't get a hangover the next day. So here's to all the great writers and directors and actors and actresses. Here's to our fellow human beings that through the noir experience give us food for thought that really enriches our lives. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, evening, if you're on the East Coast. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, love to hear your comments. If you like joining me at Jiggers' place for a cocktail and a schmooze, tell a friend about it. Tell a family member about it. I'd really appreciate it. I do this. Unlike my other shows where I'm trying to help you with your career and all that kind of stuff, and I do it also hopefully to get some business from time to time. I do this purely for the enjoyment of it, so we can enjoy some time together at the end of the week. So here's wishing you a wonderful rest of the evening, rest of the week, a restorative weekend, and signing off as I always do, to my belle, Marie, you are my belle. Courage at all times, my friends.